Virginia Giuffre's dad and attorney are reportedly questioning how she died. Giuffre was a vocal and visible accuser of Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. She was found dead on her farm outside Perth, Australia over the weekend, less than a month after she made headlines again after posting a picture of herself in a hospital bed saying she had just days to live. There are also now reportedly questions about what will happen to the money that Prince Andrew paid her in an out-of-court settlement in 2022. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. April 25th, she was found dead at her home outside Perth, Australia. Giuffre was American, but she moved to Australia in 2020 with her husband. The couple had 3 children, all teenagers. Giuffre and her husband had been in the middle of a custody dispute at the time of her death. Some members of Giuffre's family say they aren't ready to determine how she died. Her dad, who's named Skyrock,
and possibly expose the other criminals he worked with. And just one day later, this theory would be proven true. July 8th, Epstein was brought to court for his initial hearing, where the federal government unleashed a raft of charges against him, led by sex trafficking. He pleaded not guilty at his initial hearing and was held on remand at the MCC pending further legal developments. The charges echoed those he faced back in 2008, but this time they were far more thorough. Given the penalties, a conviction would almost certainly ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison, as he was nearing 70. And that was the kind of thing that could turn a man desperate. July 9th. Normally, an inmate with charges this serious would get a psych evaluation, a check to see if he might hurt himself. If flagged, he'd be locked down under tight watch with almost nothing in his cell. However, Epstein slipped through the net. The prison psychological staff only urged caution. This allowed him to be kept on psychological observation and out of the general population for his own safety, but without the extra security that might have kept him safe, because it would be a long wait to trial. July 10th. Epstein met with the prison's chief psychologist for a routine check. The log showed he was eating, sleeping, and even talking with other inmates. Epstein wasn't happy about being stuck in the SHU and asked if he could get a single cell. He was taught some coping strategies and continued to deny he was a threat to himself. The psychologist declared him stable and ordered him back to the SHU, this time with a cellmate. July 16th. Epstein met with the chief psychologist again, this time during a meeting with his lawyers. He continued to deny having any psychological issues. The psychologist's report found no concerns or any need for a follow-up session. They noted that Epstein would be monitored only through routine SHU rounds and monthly reviews. July 18th. Epstein and his legal team appeared before the judge for a second time for a bail hearing. Epstein's team attempted to present their client as a low-risk inmate and a pillar of the community who could be released safely on bail. They even proposed an arrangement where Epstein would wear an ankle monitor and be confined to his $56 million New York townhouse. But the judge ordered Epstein held in prison, citing his massive flight risk given his 20 international trips in the past year and his access to private planes. Epstein's legal team vowed to appeal, but for the moment he was heading back to his cell at MCC. And it wouldn't be long before he was in the news again. July 23rd. At 1:27 in the morning, guards were alerted to a commotion in Jeffrey Epstein's cell. The inmate was found sprawled on the floor of his cell, dazed and half-conscious. A strip of cloth was wrapped tight around his neck, the skin beneath already bruised. It wasn't serious enough to require hospitalization, but he was transferred to the psychological unit, where he was observed 24 hours a day to ensure he wasn't a danger to himself. But not everyone thought this was what it appeared to be. Epstein's roommate at the time was Nicholas Tartaglione, a notorious murder and drug trafficking suspect whose charges meant he would never be getting out. Tartaglione denied having any involvement in Epstein's injuries, and prison officials cleared him of involvement, but not everyone accepted that conclusion. Spencer Kuvin, an attorney representing several of Epstein's victims, argued it might have been a deliberate attack, an attempt to silence Epstein before he could strike a plea deal. And this was when the case really started gaining momentum in the American mind. Nothing official has ever surfaced about Epstein's black book of crimes, but everyone knew he moved in powerful circles and probably kept receipts. And so the idea of an Epstein list caught fire. The alleged roster of names and deeds tied to his private island, and plenty of people were convinced the powerful would do anything to keep it buried. July 24th. Jeffrey Epstein is transferred to his new quarters, a rude awakening even for his current situation. The observation cell for high-risk inmates consists of windows on all sides, 24/7 lighting, and every possible risk stripped away. He stayed there until July 30th by his own request, enduring round after round of psychological exams. Then officials sent him back to the special housing unit to resume his regular jailhouse stay. So how did people take their eye off the ball for a second time? July 31st. Another court hearing would take place, with the judge being briefed on all the events that happened since. It was estimated that the trial would take 4 to 6 weeks, but no formal date was set. For Epstein, it was another crushing setback, who was given yet another psychological check after marshals noted he appeared distressed on his return from court. But after a formal assessment, it was determined that it was safe to return him to his usual routine. It was the calm before the storm. August 8th. The next few weeks would pass relatively quietly, with Epstein under close watch, but a note would later surface, written during this period, in which he bitterly described his cell conditions. He claimed bugs crawled over him at night, guards left him naked in a shower for an hour, and one officer, Tova Noel, deliberately served him burnt food. These accusations were never fully confirmed or debunked, but it was one incident that should have raised more red flags. Epstein arranged a jailhouse meeting with 2 of his attorneys and signed his last will and testament. He named 2 long-term employees as his executors and placed his holdings in a trust. It was a massive alert as to what was coming next, but everyone missed it, and it wouldn't be the only time. August 9th. Epstein's routine at the prison had settled down, and few people were worried about his safety anymore, at least on the surface. The previous day, he had bought around $74 worth of items at the prison commissary, including a radio and headphones. This was seen as an indication that he was adapting to prison life, and security might be lessened soon. However, it was unlikely that he would ever be transferred to general population, due to the threat of violence from other inmates who knew about his crimes. But things happened fast from there. On the morning of the 9th, the largest information dump on the Epstein case was released to the public. Over 2,000 pages of documents related to the current accusations against him. They were seen as highly damning and ensured that even if he was somehow able to avoid conviction, his reputation would never recover. That day, Epstein's cellmate was shipped out in a scheduled transfer. By policy, he was supposed to get a new one, yet none was assigned. That night, he met with his attorneys, who said he looked upbeat. It's never been confirmed how much he knew about the document drop earlier in the day, but it is likely his lawyers informed him. But we still don't have any explanations for what happened that night. The MCC was a tightly regulated facility, housing numerous violent and high-profile inmates. Epstein was supposed to be checked every 30 minutes, a routine meant to ensure his safety. After his attorney meeting, Epstein was walked back to his cell at 6:45 p.m. by Officer Tova Noel, the same guard he'd once accused of singling him out. And that is where things start to get weird. At 7 p.m., Epstein was permitted an unmonitored phone call, normally forbidden under Bureau of Prisons policy, but allowed by the unit manager. Records listed the call as going to his mother's number, but that wasn't the case. In reality, he was talking to someone else, someone close to him. When it ended, Epstein walked back to his cell, a cell he now occupied alone. That night, Noel and her partner were on duty to run the standard inmate checks. Both had spotless records until now. Cameras caught them skipping the 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. counts. At 10:30, Noel strode past Epstein's door but never looked inside. The cell count was submitted and approved based on the falsified information, and the lockdown for the night began. It wouldn't be the only strange thing to happen that night. The guards were required to check every 30 minutes, but from midnight until 6:30 a.m., Noel and her new partner Michael Thomas never entered the cells. Cameras caught them sitting at their desks, sleeping and browsing online. But the paperwork told a different story. During this time, they signed multiple false count slips, indicating they had checked the cells repeatedly. Hallway cameras showed no one ever stepped into Epstein's cell. The cover-up might have never been discovered if investigators hadn't later reviewed the footage. And soon, their job failure would become worldwide news. August 10th. It was 6:30 at the MCC. Chow time. The guards were distributing breakfast, but one inmate was missing. The morning shift guards arrived at Epstein's cell and found him in a near-seated position, a strip of bed sheet tied around his neck and fixed to the top bunk. He was unresponsive, already in cardiac arrest. The guards immediately hauled him down and began performing CPR, reportedly yelling at the criminal to breathe. But Epstein was gone. He had been dead for almost 2 hours.